And this really could be likened to the failure of a son, let's just use that as an example, of not following through with certain assumptive promises, right? Of you didn't till the land today and you failed your entire family. And then to stand with boldness and to say, yes, I did, and you failed me, but in the sense of I no longer am bound by the things of this world, and the fact that you wanted me to continue on with this lie of feeding the beast. Feeding the beast means that you are pushing me toward the same shackles, the same prison that you're stuck in. And today, I have finally awoken. Today, I have finally seen and cannot unsee. And that bold statement is something universally that has to be respected by the soul, from soul to soul. But it doesn't mean that the relationship is mended. In fact, there's now a separation, a division physically between the two parties. I am no longer your son. I follow a higher principle, standard, and yet there's a reverence with the spiritual transcendence where now you're leaving planet Earth. Now you are leaving the false confines of illusion that we live in. You are no longer bound by the presupposed obligations of the falsified self. You are no longer in a familiar spiritual sense part of the family, but you are part of a universal family, and we may meet again one day, son.
So this is just based on Rudolf Steiner Press, audio press, which I've listened to extensively, but I haven't recently. And I was just watching a video the other day that was based on Golgotha, which really is something that has to be looked at as a personal evolutionary transcendence of the individual. And this isn't talked about very often, and it's taboo in our culture. But as to whether or not, and this brings in the Gospel of Mary, a lot of the Coptic Gnostic text that Nathaniel Gillis loves talking about, the Apocryphon of John. I almost said the Apocryphon of Truth, because that is one of those that I believe is a must read in the interpretation. But what I'm trying to discuss here is a male-female filter, a lens, if you will, that points to how the female sees and interprets and gains from information, what information she gravitates toward. People are afraid of the term witchcraft because the connotations have become scary for a reason, and that is there was a culmination through democratic process of feminine energies that warded away and said, back off to certain male energies. If we look back through history, we as the male energy gave human females, a head start. It was done like it's done through government, it's done through religious practices, it's done throughout history, and now that it's become a global epidemic of sorts, you're watching a transition occur where the ladder's dropping out and there is no more going back. There's no more going back. So the woman has supposedly stepped away from a carnal codependency of male that wasn't spiritually and mystically carnal or temporal or corporeal based from the beginning. And so I believe that females literally ground males in both a positive way and a negative way. Positive for them, positive for the family, positive for the biological pangs of being pressed toward childbirth, and for that to be their physiological fulfillment, but knowing and needing more, reaching out for more, and then the wall that we all hit, whether male or female, of are we able to break free from the tracks that we're on that allow us to go into a psycho-spiritual or mystical evolution And so I really love Rudolf Steiner because he showed a reverence and respect regardless of sex, really, but said this in such a subtle way that really only certain people, when I'm saying certain people, I really do believe. So I'm not like putting human females on a chopping block and saying they are not capable of transcendence. You know, there's so many males that have proved that females are really grandly ahead of them in a spiritual evolutionary way. However, once there is this cashing in of a power play, the carnal, the worldly, the money system, females tend to, and the female mind that is shared and gone into, acquisitioned, and swam in by certain groups, whether it be ethnic, epigenetics exist. To discount epigenetic influence is to also throw away the things that you consider gifts or traits that are skills. So there's good and bad there, right? So-called good and bad, beyond good and evil. And so the gospel of Mary is a real, and the gospel of truth, I believe, and the gospel of Judas Iscariot, as well as the gospel of Thomas. I feel like those, I picked those out really early after reading through, and the gospel of truth, it's just, you don't have to be a male or a female to spiritually align with and understand what it is saying. So my whole point is this necessary progression toward an ultimate payout. Like, okay, you reached enlightenment. You reached the top of the hill. Nothing's changing. You're still stuck in the corporeal. Your energy is stuck inside these cells, literally stuck inside the cells, and the cells are combined into this bodily form, cymatically being imprisoned, as well as our genetic code and all that junk DNA, all the dark matter imprisoning us. Not that that's exclusively what that's for, but who knows, quite possibly. And that in order for us to get free, we have to go through the process of life-death cycle, of the track that we're on through the aging process or through the repulsion, the rejection by earthly means. Mean, golden mean, ratio, reason, degree. So females are stuck, human females are stuck in a place where their biology, do they really want to get free from the biology of being a female? That's the question. And so it gets into Jesus' statement to Mary that she has become male. And in my opinion, it's not just stating physiologically she has become male. It's the statement of she has recognized the, in a fundamental, monad-based, as the pure source, she has recognized, we're going to say the Y, the male principles, as being the process. That she's no longer on a track to biologically reproduce, whether or not she had produced or not. It's the mind. It's like going through this transcendence that we all pretend. We really pretend that we want to go through it because we want to have our cake and eat it too. And isn't that the perfect phrase? Is that the human female has to get away from this idea or ideology of, I can do it all. I can juggle it all. I can make the men do this, and I can, multitask in such a way where I'm taking in the necessary provisions. It's necessary. I gotta have it. Whereas the male, John the Baptist, well, look at the trials of all of the disciples, which showed a processionary path in the rejection through an astrological expression of how different expressions of the Y chromosome of the male, of leaving the capsule by the man in the mystical, cosmic, universal man, and getting away from leaving the securities of his own genetic propensity, of the house of the place that he is housed in within the Y chromosome material as the center to the earthly self, and now reaching out like Vitruvian Man, reaching out like the Y, the shape of the Y, reaching out cosmically toward the cosmic energies, but beyond the cosmic energies, toward Monad, but not existentially reaching out. So from to really not commit suicide, but to end his epigenetic journey, to no longer pass on the struggles of fathers and the failures that are made, and the generational information epigenetically that is passed on. In other words, to end his lineage, to end his lineage as he is no longer anchored to an earthly assumptive projection of the self. He is no longer the assumptive self. He is a part of the one self, and therefore freed from time and space. So I would cut it off right here, but I feel like there has to be some clarity on what I'm trying to say as far as when they say the divine feminine. It is embracing the divine feminine as we're going to say hermaphrodite, but it's really the male female hermaphrodite self has and had the ability, and we do have the ability, the removed is through process of engineering. I believe that is the big thing that's missing. It's talked about with the Zulu. It's talked about this separation of male and female, and yet still we have nipples. Still, if we go on hormone therapy, we can very closely resemble male or female. You could swear you're standing in front of a male. Even human females that do not take any sort of hormone therapy, just naturally you'd swear you're standing in front of a male. And then there's the psychological act of going about pretending to oneself, imagining that there's bridging the gap. Males have nipples. Males have very similar feelings, but you can't get past the fact that I have a Y chromosome, and that is what makes me male. But there are those who actually have an altered state of their hormones that are closer resembling both male and female. They have, smaller gonads, and there are other features, even though they may appear as male. I believe that there's no Y chromosome with this mutation, but it does exist. And that's physical, but in a spiritual way, we are all working past a sort of junk DNA that is really, I believe, the finished aspect and the beginning aspect of this projection, this illusion that we are all in, that of an Earth, of a carbon-based planet. I'm not just saying that there's just carbon. What I'm saying is it's the carbon that gives it form, the carbon death that gives it a timestamp, not to delineate any of the other elements that make us up, or the carnal, temporal, corporeal world around us, and how those influences solidify our existence, which invariably and inevitably can no longer house the person that has reached, whether or not you want to, again, look at Overman or the Underground Man or Jesus, which describes both, the figure Jesus, or the process. You can't be an armchair warrior and claim that you've been through the same struggles as this homeless man on the street that's been on the street for 20 years. And you can't sit there as a female who has always given herself the comfort and provisions. You can make a billion excuses of what happens to this person when they're out on the street. That it's a male-driven world. That's a big one there. That so if they can't physically endure it, and I'm not saying that they can't. I've known of plenty of plenty of females that are on the street. But what they do in order to survive, when all provisions, all privilege has been taken away, like that's the whole point. Is that you have to lose. If you want to go through this evolution, you have to go through the same thing as that guy over there. That there's no longer a special privilege designation or titleship to people where they can think that they have gone through the spiritual evolution, but in fact they haven't gone through a fraction of what the man next to them, who is assumed as lesser, and yet spiritually he's been railroaded by society, by the assumptions in society, by the women that sacrificed themselves under the moniker of the need to biologically have more safety. All safety mechanisms have to be erased. All special treatment has to be removed. And then, only then, when you see what somebody has gone through existentially, there is no way to tell from the outside whether or not the spiritual evolution has taken place in a person. They're either there or they are not. A total rejection of the cornerstone. So it's not to say that females can't do this. It's just that it's quite a bit harder. I'm not going to say it's harder than for the male, because males are doing the same thing. Like to assume that males don't prostitute themselves or, just sort of give up. But that's the whole point, is that we go through this process where we're constantly giving up, we're constantly being defeated, but the spirit doesn't work like that. the spirit is waiting for the body. It's kind of like taking your dog for a walk. It's like the dog will keep going and going. And eventually when you're panting, you know, and you've been running 8 miles and you just can't do it anymore, the dog will pretend he's, you know, licking himself or do circles or just sit down and pant. And he'll be pandering to your, you know, and that's what the spirit does. The spirit just keeps traveling on, and it's looking back at the physical body and having to have that patience. So I believe that the process of spiritual evolution for females is in a different time, slightly different time algorithm or paradox set aside. And that meeting place when people think that they're seeing in a liminal where people are seeing and interacting with their loved one on the other side, if that be true, is done when there's a fall from grace, when there is an acceptance of this is good enough for me, that I don't require an ultimate spiritual transcendence to occur. But our entire, the entire process, you know, getting back to Rudolf Steiner, the soul is on a journey. The soul has failed many times. And then there is the assumption from a Coptic Gnostic standpoint of, you know, an oversoul with all souls. Not just like a concept of Gaia or, you know, these things that seem very fanciful and nice to think about, but it's the culmination of all the energies of all the souls, and that there is a etheric consciousness and presence that is a guiding force of, we have reached this evolutionary state. The body is caught up with the soul, and over all these eons of time, here we are, and yet people are standing back on the guise of now just technology. And now we have to look at, what is technology? What is the difference? How do we remove the spiritual from, like I call it the techno-spiritual, and together I call it spiritual quanta that we're looking for. We're looking for that fullness, that integer completion, that monad. And when we become that monad in a physical transformative, I'll never forget this time when I was doing this meditation and tears were coming out of my eyes, and I had reached this place where I really understood, I thought I understood the entire Messiah complex that Rudolf Steiner gets into, but it was way before I ever, I mean, this is going back 10 years, 10, 11 years. By the way, 11 is on both sides, but it's the renewal of life if you're willing to accept this as your life, this earthly plane, but 11 is a signifying of death. So when you're seeing that, it's when something needs to die and there needs to be a rebirth or a beginning. So in my opinion, when you're seeing 11:11, you're seeing that let it die, and something real, something spiritually real within your soul is going to resonate forth and culminate with all the I hate to use the word cosmic energies because it's not existentially out there. It is all within you, holographically, if you will. And the sun and all the energies I could feel just shining on me, going into me. And when we think that we're experiencing something on our own that no one else can see, there's these two guys, and they're very aware of what's going on, and then I can start to hear them. They're close enough to where I can hear them talk. It was bouncing, like their voices were literally echoing off the roof of the vehicle that I was driving. And it was parked down near the beach. And their conversation went something like, what do you have to have, like, perfect abs to reach this, that place, Messiah? And it's out there for all of us. It's not exclusively there for anyone. Just because somebody reaches a certain form of fitness, I believe that others have possibly evolved beyond that. I'm not saying that people who... So there is a perfection that has to take place in the physical at some point through these incarnations. But perhaps you'd already reached that several incarnations ago and you feel that. And that's no longer something that you need. Now that you've moved past that, you're no longer worried about meeting the Vitruvian Michelangelo-based phi perfection. Like, challenge unlocked, right? You're moving on. So we're going through this sort of, like, it almost really does seem like it's formatted like a game. It almost seems like once you unlock these challenges, something from a celestial sense is seeing that, and then there's a balancing from a totally spiritual aspect of, has this achievement gone to your head and polluted you in a spiritual sense. In other words, if there's one inkling of a seed of corruption, you're not there on the cross balanced in the middle. You're not lighter than a feather when that final weight of your soul is taken into account. So there are these various different arms of development that through principle that people don't and can't assess nor see from the outside. You can reach a level of purity, and not necessarily, but necessarily through abstinence, but taking on and embracing an entire different transcendent concept of the exercise of these principles through the actionable deeds within of being true to the self, but not necessarily going off the wall, but necessarily like Ayn Rand, where you take on the responsibility of being selfish, that I'm not going to be able to, we'll go one more minute, I'm not going to be able to effectively achieve my spiritual evolution until all of the energies are no longer diverted, until I am no longer preoccupied by anything existential on the outside. I've done all that I could for the people out here, and now that I am exhausted, which may be a necessary part of the process, so I'm just looking at the time, is an exhaustion of all corporeal, carnal, temporal, physical efforts, that we have done all we can for those that we love and our loved ones, and now it is time to put 100% of those energies into the self. And so I think that females are being given a task that is it's a very difficult thing to work past, because they feel this pang biologically of service, but that they need to kind of think a little more like Ayn Rand, and then even evolutionarily, spiritually work beyond that, which, who knows, maybe Ayn Rand did that. No edicts, principles of purity.
In basic, what I'm discussing here is that we have to graduate past other people. And ultimately what that means is that we have to graduate past ourselves. Once we start taking on these concepts, these spiritual concepts, these themes, and it's no longer something we're playing with, we know that this is real. In fact, this is more real than anything that we assume is being real here. And that's when we are in this heavily alterable state, if you will. And this is when your soul can either become more corrupt, or it can draw in more energy, the quickening, the supercompensation, if you will. And once we're no longer governed by edicts, we are led by principle, but not principles of the earth, not principles of the world, not the principles that we have to use. And that's the whole thing about esoteric principles of light, EPL, is that unfortunately we have to turn toward principle. Unfortunately, we have to guard ourselves in combat with these principles. But if we reach this true state of purity, and that's the hardest part, is the fact that there's such a codependency. There's a codependency and a reliance even on the false self, even on the person that we think we know. We are in a toxic relationship with ourselves, with our corporeal form, with all of the junk and the crap that genetically and epigenetically pushes us toward some sort of duty toward this rotting state of being. And that we must see ourselves, and we must take the actions from a spiritual sense of the transcendent one, that there is no going back, there's no stepping away from. This is who we are, this is our journey, we have remembered, and we no longer can be abstracted by the druthers of planet Earth.